Mr. McKenna, great to see you again.
Great to be back.
I think you are probably the most frequent guest on the Great Conversations
I've
podcast.
written a song called Together Again for your next podcast, so we can play that one.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, we'll have a new intro.
Yeah.
But I see you're wearing some cool swag there.
Yeah, man, you got to have the merch, Cal. You know how this goes.
I don't know. I'm going to have to talk to Ken about some Canadian merch or something like that. But no, it looks good. Go Teams Media. Well, obviously for some people, this is going to be the first time they've heard of Cory McKenna and who you do, who you are, what you do. So why don't you give us a brief rundown?
Yeah, so Cory McKenna, founding president of the CrossCurrent. And so short story, after about 17 years of pastoral ministry, I had been running sort of parallel with this equipping and outreach radio ministry called the CrossCurrent, which was founded in 2007. And God opened up many doors, whereby in 2018, I stepped out in faith as a full-time equipping evangelist missionary with the CrossCurrent. So the CrossCurrent, by way of mission, Cal, is a local missions ministry that equips the church, we say by example, to normalize sharing the gospel. And we take part in all kinds of gospel ministry services, including media, which is what this conversation I think is going to be about. And so we're just all in for equipping the church to share Jesus.
Right. And so equipping people to share the gospel message, because I think that is an area where the church is just so deficient right now. And I'm not saying that in a derogatory way. I just think people find the environment incredibly hard to navigate. How do you have a conversation about Jesus with the average person that really has no Bible knowledge? They probably don't go to church, may have some misunderstandings about what the faith entails. I talk to a lot of people and they're just like, I just don't know how to launch that conversation.
That was me, man.
Right.
Back in 2004, I hit this wall whereby, I heard all kinds of conversations inside the walls of the church.
Right.
And even from pulpits, I heard the gospel being shared. But as far as outside the walls, I mean, Jesus said, go and tell, not come and see.
Yep.
I had no clue how to do that. And so someone equipped me by example. And so as discipleship goes through demonstration, we just started doing the same. And one after another, we saw more and more people who were strengthened for gospel witness, both to advance and give a defense for their faith. It's critical.
Yeah, I remember that video where Kirk Cameron was sharing his faith with these these gang members. And we probably saw it like within the same 2 days or something.
I think you sent it to me, matter of fact. Yep. And
I just remembered, it kind of blew my mind. Like, you can just do that. You can just talk to somebody about Jesus. And of course, that was a big part of just really opening your eyes that you can actually do that, right?
Absolutely.
And you've interacted with trying to think of the Kiwi's name.
Ray Comfort.
Ray.
Ray and Mark Spence is actually a friend of mine. He's the senior vice president of Living Waters. And so I've learned so much from those guys. Matter of fact, that was sort of the genesis that launched the CrossCurrent Radio show. I was so impacted by their outreach ministry to the community. And they talk with the guy at the Mohawk. And I was just amazed as to how they could, in a sense, disarm those folks through conversation.
Right.
And frankly, it was you and I that sort of I think it was, you might not remember this, I think it was over an ice cream cone out in St. Thomas, not far from where we're sitting, where we just sort of talked about, wow, radio would be a pretty accessible and a pretty high impact way to share the gospel. But little did I know, the program running in the background is what we're going to talk about, is there's a whole process leading up to that conversation that is missed in the broadcast. And what I mean by that is it's sort of, in a sense, worked against the ministry that I'd founded, because our whole thing is equipping by example to normalize the gospel. You can do this, Christian. You can do this, Christian. They'd listen to me in 10 minutes on broadcast radio and they'd go, I could never do that.
Right.
Wrong result.
Yeah.
So our goal is not to impress. Our goal is to inspire, because Jesus said, "Go and do this." Right. So that's kind of the background to Go Teams Media, and really the discipleship component leading to evangelism, and that is a different focus.
Right, because we've said this several times, but you watch a guy like yourself, or you watch a guy like Ray Comfort share the gospel, and you're blown away. But I think in most people's heads, that's what they're thinking. Well, that's amazing, but I could never do that. Now, the fact is, I think Ray and yourself would both say, yeah, but did you know what it took to get to that point, that, what I researched, what I looked into, all the prayer behind that, how many times I've actually now had a conversation. And by the way, you probably don't air the ones that didn't go. I don't know.
Absolutely true.
Maybe there's a whole catalog of things that Ray has that he hasn't released, but the guy's a machine. He's just constantly.
So true story related to that. We liken learning to share the gospel to learning to drive a car. Now, most people watching, if they're of age, drive vehicles.
Yep.
And that's doesn't impress many people. I pulled in the parking lot, you pulled in the parking lot. We didn't ask each other to, hey, show me how you parked your car on the street. Why is that? Because so many people drive. And so if you think about how you learned to drive a car, there was a training manual.
Yep.
Absolutely true. But you just didn't stay in the classroom. Someone took you out and they drove the car first, 10 and 2, and you watched them and you asked a bunch of questions and you went through all kinds of different road conditions and traffic conditions and eventually you switched seats and they asked you a bunch of questions and man, you're like white knuckling it. Well, that white knuckling it is the first time I went out and shared the gospel on the streets, man. I'm like, whoa. But what we didn't do is just stay in the classroom. You needed to have some sort of obstacle course, some sort of system for actually showing people how to drive the car. You can't just learn by reading a book.
Yeah.
That's the same thing. And so I would dare say that over time, as you gain more experience, you gain more expertise. So sort of expertise and experience kind of go hand in hand.
Yep.
It starts to become a little less impressive. And so when I was training, over years, I've trained many, many people by God's grace to share the gospel. And I remember this one young guy, and he kind of was starstruck with, wow, man, I've seen you on YouTube. I've seen you on YouTube, and man, I've listened to your teaching. I caught you at this big conference. And I'm like, oh yeah. And it was that one. And I remember saying, hey man, look, 3-month guarantee. I say this jokingly, but 90-day guarantee with the CrossCurrent's this. If you will walk with me every week for 2 hours a week under my mentorship, within a very short time, you won't be impressed anymore. He said, not a chance, man. You're the guy. You're the guy. Okay, let's try this. So long and short of it, 6 weeks in, I mean, the guy halfway, we'd walked away from this conversation with this self-proclaimed atheist, and as we walked away, my little mentee, my little disciple says to the disciple maker, the mentor, you kind of botched that one, didn't you? He was no longer impressed.
You should have said that.
Because he had just driven the car enough to start to spot the fact I wasn't perfect driving either.
Right. Yeah. Well, I guess, with my martial art background, I totally relate to this. Obviously, if you're going to learn self-defense, right? And people are so intimidated, and of course, because it's a combat arena, which spiritual warfare is as well.
Absolutely.
But in the physical, you obviously don't go in there and just start sparring or do it. You've got an instructor, someone has gone before you. They've got expertise. They, bring you along incrementally. They're seeing how they're gauging your natural affinity or whatever. Some people are doing it for health reasons. Some people, I want to compete or whatever. And eventually, though, you do have to put your skills to the test. And that's
Cal,
what
you've nailed it. What you've really said there so eloquently is to improve and to become just more confident in any discipline requires a process.
Right.
And I would dare say most people have no process for evangelism. It's just like, wow, it's every day is a new day and they're spinning around and they get overwhelmed. I get that. Like you said at the top of the hour, it is overwhelming, man. Social media hasn't helped that. You think everyone's an expert and they're only parroting culture, right? You actually talk to one person and it becomes pretty obvious that the world's not thinking as much as we think they're thinking. A lot of them are parroting other people.
Yeah.
But a process is critical, and that really is what sort of launched Go Teams Media is a discipleship process leading to evangelism. I love that. So true.
Now, if I bring this coach analogy in, I've seen a lot of different coaches, a lot of different trainers over the years, and some coaches are like really, really good at what they do. And then they'll open a school, for example, and then basically the way they coach is kind of like making clones of themselves. Do you know what I mean? It's kind of like, well, I'm really good at an armbar. I'm really good at this. I'm really good at that. And then that's what they're impressing on their students, where I found the better coaches were the ones that kind of go, okay, well, what's best for you? And how do we, well, you got this body style, or you're this kind of athleticism, or you've got this kind of mentality. Some people are more cautious. Some people are more defensive. Some people are really aggressive, whatever. And I want to kind of segue into your Go Teams media, because that's what I'm really seeing you do right now, right? Like, all the respect for Ray and
Absolutely.
The way of the master and all that stuff.
Indebtedness. Ray, if you're watching, indebtedness.
Yeah, absolutely, brother. You're the man.
He's the man, yeah.
But kind of like, I've seen a lot of people that, get their material and then all of a sudden they kind of sound like mini Ray Comforts.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Not mini, but you know what I mean? They're replicating. And by the way, when I started, really looking into the area of origins, I remember listening to Ken Ham stuff over and over and over again. I mean, my first couple of presentations, people were like, do you think you're Ken Ham? Because, I'm using his jokes, I'm using his whatever. I just wanted to replicate what he'd said because he'd said it so well.
Yeah.
And then, of course, over time, got my own relevance talk and all that stuff. But so tell me more about your Go Teams Media initiative, because that's going to be launching this fall, correct?
Yeah, right.
Here in Canada. And then you're going to be getting that out on multiple platforms. We'll talk about that. But what's the approach to Go Teams Media that you think is just more unique than a lot of evangelism equipping? We've all seen a lot of videos of people sharing the gospel.
Yeah, that's a fantastic question, because I believe a sort of a vision that God gives us of church on mission. We call it His gospel, which we've talked about, and His gifts for His glory. And so I think one of the key components of Go Teams Media, and what is Go Teams Media, Cal? It's what we call a groundbreaking, and we can get into that little word picture in a second here, groundbreaking gospel ministry, specifically of young adults who are equipped by the CrossCurrent really to converse and to connect around news and current events that matter most. And we do that in conversation with our community, non-Christians in our community. Right. But what's so key to this whole process, so we've developed a team. I know you have an affinity for the Avengers. If you could picture the Avengers, if you like Ocean's 11, I don't know what your favorite sort of image is of a team of very diverse, sort of collaborative warriors at their particular trade. So what we've done is we've honed in on their spiritual gifts. And so I think one of the best ways of avoiding, you're right, that pitfall of trying to make, mini me's, as Cory McKenna or Cal Smith, Jesus is the one we're trying to replicate. Follow my example. Paul said, I follow his. But one way is to discover and demonstrate the spiritual gifts of each person on the team. And so what you can picture with really Go Teams Media is, we know, and you and I both know, that somewhere between 8 out of 10, 18 to 25-year-olds are currently leaving the church forever. Right. I mean, it's the black hole of local missions ministry. We see in higher institutions, that's a huge problem. I mean, you get the Christian kid, goes through children's ministry, goes through youth ministry, on his or her way to university and college, and you kiss them goodbye. And this is a serious problem. This isn't just sort of disinterest. This is a total disconnection. Yeah, Gen Z is basically the most apathetic generation we've seen towards anything related to God. They just it's dismissed. Absolutely. And so one of sort of the key verses that we teach at Go Teams Media is this. Colossians chapter 2 verse 8 says, "See to it that no one takes you captive by philosophy and empty deceit, according to human tradition, according to the elemental spirits of the world, and not according to Christ." We know that so much of that captivation and that deceit happens in institutes of higher education. So the discipleship goal, this is sort of enter Go Teams Media. Now, circling back to your providential comments really about Ray Comfort and how much we thank God for Ray and that conversation that we watch on YouTube or listen to on podcasts. We're very thankful for that. That was sort of the CrossCurrent Radio show. So we ran the show since 2007, and it was broadcast radio. It was on Apple iTunes, still is. You can still listen to the show, but it really just shared the conversation. And so it was that little snippet of, wow, that was a great conversation. It was a cherry on the cake. You got to see the final product kind of. Exactly. It was the victory lap of all that came before it. And so what the discipleship goal of Go Teams Media is to honor Christ, as he says, in thought, in word, and in action. So what we want to do, we want to process out, to your point, to storyboard the discipleship through demonstration lead up to the conversation. Now, I'm not a fan of 24. I think it was a popular show with Kiefer Sutherland, and I think the premise was they sort of show you the end, And then they'd wind it back and show you how you got there.
Right.
I think that's the premise. But if it's not, I apologize to those who like the show. But that's sort of what we're going after here. So there's a couple different ways people could get to Go Teams Media. Either they watch the conversation, Christians or non-Christians, about news, current events that matter most. What matters most to us as Christians is different than my unsaved family and friends. We're talking about God and His Word. That's who matters most to us.
Right.
So what you're going to see, a news story, a current event, some topic that's sort of people are already conversing about.
Yep.
We're going to meet on that conversational common ground of that topic, but we know that racism on the surface, what's groundbreaking about Go Teams Media is if you drill down in conversation with anyone about racism, you get to a foundational issue.
Right.
Origins.
Right.
Where do we come
So
from?
you're using racism as an example of a topic that you might drill down on. That's pretty popular in culture right now, where it's talked about a lot. So,
and Cal, there's a finite list of topics. I might say, and I don't want to oversimplify, I haven't thought this out. There's probably 20 main topics or something that if you will learn to think Christianly about, starting with the Bible, if you now watch something like Go Teams Media, you watch, whether it's Ray Comfort guy, Todd Friel, who's so skilled at disarming people in conversation. Yep. What you have to understand is they are now benefiting from a process of discipleship no one's probably seen before. Right. We're trying to demystify the conversation by showing how we got there.
Yeah, demonstrate the process that led these people to the point where they can have those types of conversations. And of course, this all relates to what we do with Answers in Genesis, because Genesis is the seedbed of all Christian doctrines, and sooner or later, we're going to bump up against culture at some point, and the foundation for all our doctrines are there. So obviously you need to get equipped there as well. So just so people are understanding, because we've conversed, but I just want our listeners to really understand. So you've got a team of young adults. How many people are on the team?
There are 7 people on the team.
Okay.
Currently. And not just because that's God's perfect number, nothing to do with that. That's just who the Lord brought.
Who the Lord brought. And I want to kind of revisit, because you used like Ocean's 11 or the Avengers or whatever. I want to kind of, in a sense, debunk that, because actually these are just average young people, right? These aren't, the super soldiers, so to speak. These are just like, would you consider these young people like so far above, they're just a group of young people that have stepped up to the plate and said, we want to share Jesus.
Yeah. And within the illustration of the Avengers, I'm just saying that they have a diverse spiritual gift set that we've sort of involved in the ministry.
I just didn't want people to get the idea like, oh wow, they're already coming out of the gates and they're
No, these are, and matter of fact, Cal, it's interesting you asked the question that way, because we've actually, this is going to sound maybe a little bit backwards, but go with it. We've actually asked, we believe these are the people the Lord has brought to pilot Go Teams Media. Now, we hope there's other Go Teams media locations. Right. This could happen anywhere. Yeah. But this is the pilot group. We believe the Lord has brought this pilot group. So we've actually, as CrossCurrent leadership, said to them, if you're called to this, pray about this. If you're called to this, you tell us within your busy life of being a student. Maybe you're just starting work. I mean, they are young adults. Maybe they're courting, whatever's going on. What time can you devote to this? And that's what we work with, because what we're trying to model, to demonstrate for other young adults is you can do this with the time you have. Right. You can figure out how to live.
You can be a full-time student. You can be just newly married. You can, and
you don't have to be a full-time missionary to do this.
So again, I want to try to just really break it down so our listeners get it. Okay, so you got a group of young people that are like, yeah, we want to share Jesus and we want to go and engage the culture in things. So from what you have told me in the past, you're kind of analyzing what's going on in culture, and then does your team just choose a topic that they're going to research and equip themselves before so that they can prepare biblically, they can look at the scriptures and get themselves, kind of give our audience here a taste of how that would look as a process.
Yeah, that's great. And so if you think of this command of Christ, thought, word, deed, we're to think Christianly, to quote Greg Bonson, think Christianly. We're to speak Christianly, because thoughts become words, words become actions, and then we're to live Christianly. So this has got to change you, or it's not being, accurately applied as God's word. So the first step, you're right, is to think Christianly. So we have something called a war room. It's typically virtual, whereby we jump on something like a Zoom call, and we collaborate about what's going on. These young adults, just like all young adults,
have you heard about this article? Have you heard about this thing happening?
They're already doing this. Yeah. They're already doing this. So, hey, have you seen this? Have you heard about that? I had a conversation in the cafeteria. This happened.
Right. There was a new UFO sighting or whatever.
Exactly. So all of that lands in the war room, and we collaborate. And it's amazing how kind God is. There's always a theme that develops. So we go, wait a sec. So the last time we talked about aliens, we talked about racism, we talked about all these issues that are swirling in culture. And as leaders, as really myself being the director of the ministry, origins.
Right.
Drilling down, everyone gets the visual here. We drill down to the foundational issue. This is an issue of where do we come from?
Right.
That's our pilot topic, and it is our pilot topic. And so from there, now what? Well, now we parse out to the researchers. So you're going to have an anchor. So if you think media, the titles within the team are the anchor, assistant anchors. There's a sound engineer, there's a videographer. So it's a media team,
right? Just
like you'd see, whether it's whether Fox News or whatever. There's a media team, hits the location. And so what happens now is the researchers, we assign one researcher or two to look into the biblical worldview on that topic,
right?
Typically now, namely origins. But then someone else, well, what's the world saying about that? Now, obviously we have evolution, and what are the arguments that we're hearing about that? And so they're given, and this is the bulk of it. We think Christianly. That's where this must start. We've got to take thoughts captive, make them obedient to the Lordship of Christ. So those people now go and they do research, they do interviews with experts, they do basically personal research and development of that issue. Then we come back to the war room and we converse about all that they discovered. And we shake down, great, what are great ways to start conversations with people so we can speak Christianly?
Right.
Now, that's just not conversations, with a fancy media team and lights. And that could be a conversation, we hope, that happens at the water cooler or at the gym.
Right.
And what we're trying to do the whole way is document through internet, to have a GoTV, sort of a vlog production that documents that whole discipleship through demonstration process, whereby people can actually look in on how did this conversation develop? How did they get there?
Right. So it is like that program you mentioned where it's like, here's the end, and then you're going to rewind kind of thing. So people could just watch that and go, wow, that was a really interesting conversation these Christians had with somebody about aliens. Or they could say, wow, how did they have such a winsome answer? How were they able to engage? How were they so knowledgeable about that? And how were they able to go to verses in the scripture that I might not have thought of that relate to what's going on here? And then you could watch the whole process of kind of an average person, just who, like the average Christian who hasn't really thought these things through that much. And you show them the whole process so that they can go, well, I could have done that.
Exactly.
Or I did that virtually through watching your program.
So in your combat sport example, my driving example, it's sort of like involving a whole team of coaches, expert coaches, and coaches that actually, if you understand combat sports or any sport discipline, you've got a whole bunch of experts who give you very specific skills and exercises with each thing. And it's the same thing. We're trying to involve pastors and obviously apologists and missionaries. To be really honest, from the world's perspective, we're actually quite open to hearing from the authority in evolution to try to understand their perspective.
Absolutely.
Because conversation actually involves both listening, active listening, and talking as well. And so we want to winsomely dialogue that way. The Lord's servant must not be quarrelsome, kind, respectful to everyone.
Yeah, and you want to represent the other opinion in a proper manner. You don't want to use straw man arguments or anything like that. I mean, the best way I've heard it said is you want to steel man your opponent, not straw man them.
Yeah, that's good.
Steel man them, and then demonstrate how the Christian worldview actually is superior to. It's not just superior; it's the truth.
Exactly.
And any time you compare that any kind of counterfeit bill with a real bill, there's a difference. But don't misrepresent what they're trying to do. Say, okay, give them every benefit of the doubt. Give them all of that stuff, and then in comparison, Christ's truth will be shown.
And that's it. And so groundbreaking actually is sort of it's got a whole bunch of sort of meanings to it, but the idea of a groundbreaking gospel ministry by way of discipleship, it's groundbreaking because most Christians are duped into just thinking on the surface. There's fruit and root issues, and we're sort of caught in this narrative up here.
Whoa,
it's an illusion.
Yeah,
really, it's an illusion.
Yeah.
I remember Del Tackett years ago with Truth Project called it an illusion. But as you drill down in conversation, you realize, wait a sec. This again is founded on, the truth is founded on God and His Word in every category of human existence. So as we converse and connect with people, so this is a Go Teams Media, what we call a contact card.
Right.
So obviously our goal is the local church. We're not a church. We're a servant ministry with and for the local church. So every Go Teams Media anchor, assistant anchor, sound engineer, videographer, we carry loads of these things. And on the back, it says conversing and connecting on what matters most. It has the website. It has an email address if they want to connect. And it has one of these QR codes so they can scan and get right to the website. The goal here is that every conversation would end with a winsome question that goes something like this. Look, we've had a great conversation here.
Right.
Would you be open to continuing the conversation on some platform, maybe email, maybe FaceTime?
Yeah.
And if they say, yeah, I think so, I would humbly, now look, the word of God can offend and people can walk away mad. It's happened to me lots.
Yeah.
But I think if we're being respectful, if we're being gentle, if we're actually listening, and we're not compromising, we're having that sounds like a conversation. Our hope would be a great conversation. Our hope would be to address something you said earlier. This is not a simple fix, Cal. You're talking about years and years and years of weeds that have grown over the local mission field. So a lot of conversations feel like you're tilling soil to plant seed. I mean, you're just getting them to think about some stuff. So I don't think it's, at least in our market space, I don't think it's realistic to expect, much like Paul in Acts 17, I mean, you had those three responses. Most rejected Paul. Yeah. Paul, you've been out in the field too long, man, right? It says that some reflected.
Yeah.
They went, we need to hear more.
Yep.
Few repented and followed Paul.
Yeah.
We hope for repentance, but what's the mechanism? Because someone's going to ask a good question. Sounds great. So you're going to have all these conversations. You're going to have this whole media team. And so how do you, here's the word, follow up with people? This is one way, but our goal is to have running in the background our partner churches whereby they can actually have volunteers who can interface, whether that's over a chat form, they can interface with the people we speak with to try to build that bridge from culture to church. But I'm just encouraging as a guy who's been around this a little while. Yeah. Sometimes that's a long bridge. Yep. Sometimes that's a long bridge.
I think the approach you're doing is so important because I think in the world that we live in with sound bites and, tweets and TikTok videos and stuff, and I get it. We're all busy and we're trying to communicate, things and stuff. But let's face it, people want to have an actual conversation with somebody and feel like they're being heard. I think so many times it's just like, boom, there's a bad answer. It's just, here's the deal. And let's face it, humans are complicated. You could go talk to 100 Christians and say, can you tell me your testimony from a human point of view, from what you experienced? And you're going to hear so many things and so many engagements. And this person said that and da-da-da-da and all this stuff. And the fact is, it's a complicated process, and people are looking to connect with people. I mean, especially during this time, it's just like, they haven't even seen family and friends for a long time. So somebody that actually takes the time, that really cares for them and says, hey, do you want to continue this conversation? I bet you a lot of people would. And if now's not the time, that's fine. But at least they had the proper taste in their mouth. That I remember talking to a guy, and actually he wasn't like that at all. Or if somebody says something, and
can I pray for you? I mean, obviously we're a Christian gospel media ministry, so the opportunities to use the gifts in that moment as God opens up doors would just be amazing. I mean, how neat would it be to give that non-Christian who is in terrible danger? Right? God's wrath and condemnation's on them to not just, and I don't want to say it's not great just to share the gospel. That's an amazing thing to sow that seed and give those words of life and call people to repentance. But wow, for them to come into contact with just a little slice of the church in that on that, that sidewalk or wherever, that university campus, that will leave a mark on people.
Absolutely.
And so we just want to make sure that we're being faithful to connect them to a Bible-believing local church in that area. So you could just picture, where couldn't a Go Teams media group walk?
Right.
Whatever major city. I mean, certainly universities and college campuses will be hot spots for these groups.
Now, I know the CrossCurrent, of course, you do a lot of evangelism training, and you've got partner churches where you're actually trying to equip someone within each one of these churches that you're partnering with to raise someone up similar to yourself that can then duplicate. And I mean, that's God's kingdom, right? It's duplication. Yeah. It's not just another addition. It's duplicate. Get others to disciple others, and so on. But what's so exciting about this is that people are going to actually be able to. You're going to release all this media on your platforms. It's going to be on Answers.tv, the Answers in Genesis streaming platform, and so people are actually going to be able to tune in and get the whole picture of how to be discipled and walk through these things, rather than get to the end and it might sound like a pat answer.
Right.
But where did that quote unquote pat answer come from? Like, how did you distill all that down? Because I think a lot of times when people get given a pat answer, they haven't thought it through. They haven't looked into all these things. So they're like, well, I don't know if I trust that conclusion. But if you see the whole process, you go, oh, yeah, I totally get why you've landed there. And that's going to be so meaningful.
Yeah, and how do I open the Bible in that conversation? And something, years ago, you and I had done a radio program on, I think I called it Going Back to the Future. And it was all about origins. Right. And one of the questions that you and I collaborated and we asked a bunch of people on the streets was, how does your faith in the past affect your fate in the future? Mm-hmm. Now, without collaboration, we probably wouldn't have come up with that. I mean, that's how this works. And so who couldn't take that same question to the water cooler, to the Thanksgiving table? Hey, heard a guy ask an interesting question. Mm-hmm. This is why the three big questions will likely be, which are, as if you've watched this podcast, you likely know, where do we come from? What's the meaning of life? What happens after we die? Really, those three questions intimated by Paul in Acts 17. Mm-hmm. Those are the basis for the CrossCurrent training. Those are the basis for the Gospel Reset evangelism curriculum, because we believe those are the three big questions. God set eternity in people's hearts, right? The meaning of life is to glorify God. Yep. People are constantly imaging their creator because they're thinking about this stuff. Yep. So what better way to start those conversations? But the point being, wow, what would it look like if you were able to, like you said, Cal, track that discipleship through demonstration process? Yep. And hey, what if we, just for kicks and giggles, what if we actually posted the resources we use? What if we posted the expert interviews with guys like you? Mm-hmm. We just fully and freely share these resources with other Christians. Yep. Kind of sounds like the excuses would be stripped away. Now, I'll be really honest. There's something, if you will, inspiring to me to just sending someone who's crazy enough to do evangelism and praying for that person. Yeah. But we're talking about something totally different. I am, as we've already said, I thank God for the guy who's crazy enough to do the edgy evangelism. Yeah. There's a place for that. And I firmly believe that, open air preaching and all those types of things. Yeah. Wonderful. But what we're talking about is equipping the saints for the work of the ministry. You've mentioned evangelists in local churches. We would call that an equipping evangelist. Right. So started a podcast recently called The Equipping Evangelist. And we believe in Ephesians 4, God gives shepherds and teachers and evangelists to actually disciple or equip the saints. Right. We're talking about discipleship leading to evangelism, but not just for me, not just for you, for every follower of Christ. Yeah, that's the thing, because think of the average person that they got a job, parents, whatever. I mean, your first level of evangelism is to equip and evangelize your own children. And if 70% of young people from Christian homes that are educated in public schools are walking away from the faith, there's something not clicking there, right? The youth group isn't doing it, going to church or whatever the things you think you're doing, there's a misstep there. And so perhaps we need to be having these great conversations with your kids to start with. And then, family, friends, all those people around you. That's interesting, Cal, because one assignment we've given the Go Teams Media group, every one of them, so not just those who are what we call mic holders, the guy who's operating Brandon, who operates our he's our sound engineer.
Yeah.
And Chris, who's our videographer. We've given them an assignment, just like it teaches in the Gospel Reset Evangelism curriculum. We're trying to thread all this together. There's a process in play here to actually reach out to someone you do know who's not a Christian,
right?
And ask them, would you be willing to be part of this media ministry that we're putting together? And would you allow me, sort of in a format like this, just to ask you these questions, someone I already do know, so that people can hear, who are watching, they can hear that the answers people give are not different in, Toronto and Los Angeles and Hebron, Kentucky. You'd be surprised that because social media has made the world very small, the answers people give are very similar. So what we're gonna see happen is, when you hear those conversations with family and friends, they're gonna sound a whole lot like the same ones you heard with the guy we
very
didn't.
relatable.
Very relatable. So we're just trying to systematically equip folks and help them be engaged in gospel conversation. And I do think it's going to be helpful to have a trailblazing group of specifically young adults, because some of the trickiest questions do come in those thinking years. You're on a university campus and you're in year 2 of philosophy, and you
can't know anything for certain.
Yeah, exactly.
Like all those things.
Exactly. And so the epistemology stuff. So we'll get there, but make no mistake, we are trying to simplify and multiply the task of evangelism. And I think this is going to be helpful.
Well, this is a key thing that I think, just as we wrap up here, is the fact that once this is put together and there's that package done, you could be anywhere in the world, access the groundbreaking research and the processes you've developed, and basically just duplicate that, right? You could be anywhere and say, hey guys, we should do what they're doing over here. Minimal preparation and stuff like that. And I mean, you're sharing so much of what you have right now. Anyway, people could just get to the CrossCurrent website and stuff and access this material. I'm looking forward to people accessing the Go Teams Media, the shows and all this stuff, and then seeing these other groups pop up. I think that's going to be incredible.
Praise God. We hope to hear lots of testimonies just about everyday people having everyday conversations with family and friends.
Absolutely. I'll let you end us out here and just tell people, where can we find Cory McKenna? Where can we find information on the ministry and the Go Teams Media? I
would just say probably the central site or page that you're going to find all these things. If you go to the CrossCurrent, thecrosscurrent.com/support, what that does is it lists out all these gospel media support sites that we have. So you're going to find Go Teams Media, you're going to find the Equipping Evangelist, you're going to find gospel health reports, all that stuff /support will get you there.
Right.
And that'll give you all you need to get equipped by example for evangelism.
Awesome. Well, looking forward to hearing more of your podcasts, and thanks again for coming on.
Thanks for having me, Cal.
Okay, God bless.